Pretty serious word.
All right, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Daf Mem Hey. Special thank you to David Merzel and for those who are mishtatef in the learning on Shabbos. All you? All texts. Full credit where credit is not due. So we're starting at a new Mishnah on the bottom of Mem Dalet Amud Beis. I hope my voice holds up. Started to wane just a little bit this afternoon. We are 4 lines from the bottom. Here we go. Shorshu yotze li sakel. Let's say that you have a shore and it is yotze li sakel. It's on its way out to be stoned. That's actually not what the Gemara means. What the Gemara means is that it went to a Gemar din and the Beis Din paskened that the shore was chayiv skila. If that happens, then all of the following things are true. The hikdisho bailov, and at that time, after the Gemar din was put into place, the bailim were makdish the animal, eino mukdash, because the animal is chayiv skila. So your hektish doesn't work. Shechato, if the animal was shechted after the Gemar din, but before the skila, then besaro aser, you're still not allowed to eat that animal. V'imat shalonig mardino, if after the animal gored, but before the Gemar din was dropped from the Beis Din, then hikdishu bailov mukdash, v'imshachto besaro mutter. So here we see a line in the sand that the moment that an animal becomes aser behana, after it gores, is not after the goring, but rather after Beis Din determines that it's chayiv skila. The action of the goring alone is not what makes an animal chayiv skila. It is a Beis Din that's machriya on the animal that he is chayiv skila. At that point, once the Gemar din kicks in, then there is an Isser Hana'ah status on the animal, and therefore, prior to that Isser Hana'ah status, which happens at the Gemar din, any transactions he does are valid. But after the Gemar din kicks in, and now they stipulate that the animal is chayiv skila, under those circumstances, then the din is that the animal's aser behana, and none of the transactions work. Then the Mishnah totally changes gears, 2 lines from the bottom. Masru l'shomer chinam v'lashoel v'lanose sachar v'lasocher. This is what we typically refer to as the arba shomrim. We have the shomer chinam, who is just a nice guy who's trying to help out. We have a shoel, who's a borrower, a nose sachar, and a socher. We have a person who is hired hand, that's a nose sachar, elsewhere in Shas referred to as a shomer sachar. And we also have a socher who's a renter. So shtickle machlokas in the Gemara where nose sachar falls in. Is a nose sachar a shomer chinam? A shomer sachar, excuse me. Is he more similar to a shomer chinam, or is he more similar to a socher? We'll discuss that a little bit in the Gemara. Okay, so one of these 4 shomrim, if they're holding your animal, so let's say I am one of those shomrim, I'm a shomer chinam or a shoel, whatever, and I have your animal. And then, what's the din if something happens while I'm watching the animal? The Mishnah says, 2 lines from the bottom, nichnesu tachas habaylim muad mishalim nezek shalim v'tam mishalim chati nezek. I replace you. If I am a shomer and something happens while I'm watching the animal, the din is that I am achroi. I'm responsible for what happens, and therefore the regular rules that would have applied to you apply to me. And therefore, if the animal's damage was done b'tamus, if it was done as a docile animal before it was considered to be a muad, I'd pay chati nezek, and if it was a muad, I would pay nezek shalim. That brings us to the open of the Gemara at the bottom of Mem Dalet Amud Beis. Let's jump into a brisa that's similar. It's just the order of the facts are reversed, but very similar to our Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us in a brisa. We'll see this Gemara later on in the Masechta. Shor shehemis, we have an animal that killed, it gored, and this is the same exact halachos as we saw in our Mishnah. Ad shelo nigmar dino, up until the time that Beis Din determines that the animal is chayiv skila. Well, then there's no Isser Hana yet. And because there's no Isser Hana, machur, if you sell it, the sale is good because the animal still has value. Hikdisho mukdash, if you want to send it over to the Beis HaMikdash, you can do so. And shachto b'saro mutter, and if you shecht it, you're allowed to eat the animal. Again, we're talking about from the time the animal gores up until, but not including, the Gemar din. However, on Mem Hey Amud Aleph on the 2nd line, one more din that needs to be added here. That if I, as a shomer, under these circumstances, if I'm a shomer and the animal gores, and now I want to give it back to you, am I allowed to give it back to you? Says the Gemara that as long as it's prior to the Gemar din, state in the Mishnah and state in the Brisa here, that I am allowed to return it muchzar. However, mishenigmar dino, Once the animal has gored and has been paskined by Bezdin that it needs to be killed, now the animal has a chiyuv skila, and therefore it's aser behana. So therefore, all of these transactions that he tries to do while the animal's aser behana, they don't count. What does that mean? Macher eno macher, your sale doesn't count. You're selling an animal that has no value. Hiktisho eno mukdash, you try to give it to the base of mikdash, no value, it doesn't work. Shachtu b'saro aser, if you shecht it, the animal can't be eaten because it's aser be'ana. And lastly, hachziru shomer lebeis bailav eno muchzar. When an animal is aser be'ana, you can't just give it back to the owner. That wasn't the animal you borrowed. It wasn't the animal you rented. You rented an animal that had value. This animal's chayv skila based on a gemar din from the bezdin, and therefore it's not worth anything. All of this is the Tanakama. On this last Nekuda, we have a machlokas from Rabbi Yaakov. On the fifth line of Mem Hamad Aleph, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Af mishenigmar dino hechzir shomer labayla muchzar. You're always allowed to return the animal. So let me articulate the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yaakov, and then we'll try to figure out what they're arguing about. According to the Tanakama, once the Gemar din kicks in, and we know that the animal is chayiv skila, so then I cannot take that animal as the shoel and just give it back to you. The animal has no value. And if you're the bailim, you don't have to take it back from me. Masha'en Kain, Rabbi Yaakov holds that you are still allowed to give it back. And the Gemara wants to know, Lema b'ha kamiflage. Perhaps the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yaakov is as follows. The Rabbanan savre, Ein omrim. We do not say be'isurei hana harei shalcha lefanecha. That would be the Tanakama. We do not say when something is aser behana, that here you go, take your animal back. We do not say that. Namely, if I'm a shomer and I have your animal and the animal gores and has a gemar din of skila, so then I am not allowed to just go over to you and say, here's your animal, because the animal's aser behana. There's no value of that animal. However, Rabbi Yaakov Savar, omrim be'isurei hana, we do say, even by isurei hana, harei shalcha lefanecha. What is the halachic power of a borrower to say back to the bailim, here's your animal that I borrowed, when the animal no longer has value? That's annoying. Think about it. If you're the owner and you lend me your cow for $1,000, and in my watch, that animal gores, and Bezdin paskins on it that it's chayiv skila. So now your $1,000 animal, due to my holding it and possessing it, is worth zero. So am I just allowed to give it back to you? That's a machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yaakov.
But isn't a bottle everything?
He's chayiv in payments. We're going to see that in a moment. He's chayiv to pay. He is chayiv to pay. But the question is about the Isra Hana status. When there is an Isra, he's obligated to pay mumminus. No, that's for sure. But the animal that he has now has no value. So I can't force you to retake that animal. That's not the animal you gave me. Because the animal you gave me is 1,000. The animal I'm giving you is a zero. It doesn't have any value.
So he pays the nezek to whoever was injured, but not to the.
Well, he pays it to the bailim. He does pay it to, oh yeah, he pays both, right? He has to pay it to the victim, and I owe you, because I was a shoel, I owe you the full cost of the animal. We're talking about the animal itself, which has no value right now. I can't force you to retake that animal. Because now I'm giving you back an animal that literally you can't use. There's a zero value. It's not just zero value, it's a burden. You have nothing to do with it. It's not helpful at all. So that's the machlokas. The Gemara says, how does this work? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, I disagree. We're 10 lines down on Mem Hey Amud Aleph, and the Gemara says that on the recommended machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Akiva, that perhaps we're arguing about an animal that has the status of Isra Hana, as to whether or not the Bailim are allowed to receive. If the show is allowed to give it back to the Bailim, Rabba says, no way. Amar Rabba, Dekule Alma. Everybody really holds that Omrim be'isurei hana harei shalcha lefanecha. Everyone agrees you're allowed to do that. How do we know this? From the world of Pesach. De'im kain, if you don't say that this is true, if you say that in fact there is a machlokas, like we just tried to present between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yaakov, the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yaakov, niflog le'inyan chametz b'Pesach. We know that there's a well-known din called chametz she'avar alav Pesach. If you have chametz that was not sold, you didn't do bittul, halacha l'maisa, you owned it over Pesach, that violated the Isra of Bal Yiro, Bal Yimatzeh. You're not allowed to own chametz on Pesach. And the halacha is that it's chametz she'avar laba Pesach, you're not allowed to eat it. So let's say that I stole something from you, or I borrowed something from you, and I didn't sell it, and you didn't sell it. So it's chametz she'avar laba Pesach. What's its value? Zero. Nothing. Isra hana. But when this Gemara is discussed in Maseches Psachim, there's no Baal Plugta. Everyone agrees you can say Haresh al Chalafarecha and give it back to the Bailam. So if you want to say there's a machlokes over here between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yaakov, that's fine. But then you also have to say there's a machlokes over there, but you can't because there isn't. So therefore, our recommended root of the machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yaakov has to be wrong. So then the Gemara pivots and tries a second attempt at trying to explain the machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yaakov. And let's review. Their machlokes is about when the Shoel says back to the Bailim, here's your cow, post Gmar Din, now that the animal's chayv skila and aser be'ana, do you have to take back the animal, yes or no? So says the Gemara, maybe that machlokes is like this. Ella, hacha, really begomrin dino shel shor shel b'fanav kimiflage. What we're talking about is whether or not a Gemar Din can be meted out when the cow is not present. The Rabbanan Savre, ein gomrim dino shel shor ela b'fanav. The only way you're ever allowed to mete out a Gemar Din on a shore, on a cow, is if the cow is in court. Could you imagine the scene? Right? It's like a bit wild. As you can see, the plaintiff and the defendant, and one of them is a cow, right? That's what the Gemara seems to say as a recommendation in the Machlokes, that when it comes to the Machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yaakov, the rabbis hold, Ein gomrim dino shel shor al b'fanav. Why? De Amar Le, because perhaps the argument could be, ahadarte nihali, had you given me my animal back, the Bailam said to the Shoel, have a me'arakna leila agma. I would have sent off my animal all the way to the water bank. And hashta atafsese lesoroi. Now my animal is caught, but biyada de lo yechilna liishta uye dina behadeh. But now it's in the hand of Bez, and I don't even have any leverage over them. I can't even do the little stick that I wanted to do to make him run away. So that's the sheet of the Rabbanan. Halfway down, Rabbi Yaakov Savar, no. Gomrim dino shel shor shelo b'fanav. Cares if the animal is there. Why do I need the animal in court? He doesn't understand anything. Oh, we had the shor pikeach a couple of days ago. But shors, they're not that smart. Dolphins might be a little smart. Monkeys are pretty smart. We share a lot of DNA with them. But they're still pretty dumb. And when you're talking about a cow, he's not processing what's happening in the courtroom. So if that's true, why in the world would I need them, says Rabbi Yaakov. So says the Gemara, Migmar havu gamre ledina. The din would be the same. Who cares if the animal's caught, not caught, in the room, not in the room? L'maisa, we know what happened. There's Eidim. We know what the shor did. Shalom Yisrael. So this the Gemara does seem to accept as the machlokas between Rabbi Yaakov and the Rabbanan in regards to whether or not a shoel who has your animal, and now that animal is aser be'ana, if I can force it to be received by you, the Rabbanan say, you cannot do that because the shor has to be present during the Gemar Din. Otherwise, the animal is not aser be'ana yet. And according to Rabbi Yaakov, they are allowed to force it. My time at the Rabbanon. Why do the rabbis say what they say, that ein gomrim dino shel shor ela b'fanav? The Gemara says, because the pasuk reads, beginning of the line, a little bit more than halfway down, Hashor yisakel v'gam be'alav yumas, kimisas habaylim, just like when a human being is brought into court, and his case is being adjudicated, and he has to be put to death, and he has to be physically present. Kach misas hashor. The same thing would be true with an animal. Ma bailim bifneim avshor b'fanav. So the Gemara makes a hekesh between a human being and the shor. And just because a human being has to be present in court when he is getting out his jury's sentence, the same thing is true with a shor. Shtickle, it's a bit of a wild hekish. What does one thing have to do with the other? Also, I wonder, during COVID, we had a lot of these cases, or in logistical cases, when you have a murder trial and the defendant is in jail and they're live streaming. So let's say this is correct, part of this is correct, that Misas Bailam, the defendant has to be present. Would Zoom count? Would a Zoom testimony be considered the Torah's threshold of the defendant being present in order to actually get capital punishment? Yes, no, maybe. Don't know. But the Gemara here says that according to the Rabbanon, just like we have to have the Bailim present physically, so too we have to have the shor present. It's not because the shor understands anything, and it's not because anything will be different in the transaction, but it's a hekesh. And if it's true by Misas Bailim, it's true by Misas Shvarim. That's crazy. I mean, respectfully, I don't mean it in a mean way. Just it's a little, it's surprising. Is a little bit of a nicer word.
Why couldn't it be that this is a way to prevent the Ramai from taking that that shiur or whatever and selling it to somebody before the din, and then the din is passed, and then he ripped the third person off.
You're saying according to the Rabbanon?
Yeah.
But the Rabbanan are saying that it's a hekesh. A hekesh is not a svara. When you're giving a svara, you're saying I can solve a problem. Hekesh is not saying I can solve a problem. Hekesh is saying that these are two peas in a pod. And it happens to be the halacha by Bailim is that you have to be physically present if you're the defendant. The same din is true over there. Not logical, just it's a derech halimud. When we have a hekesh, it's not because it makes sense to us. Sometimes when people go to Bezdin, they're surprised by the response because halacha isn't always based purely on svara. It's sometimes based on a hekesh. Sometimes it's based on a kal v'chomer. Sometimes it's based on a gzeres hakasu. Sometimes it's based on a ribui and a miut. Or there's 100 possible limudim that we don't know about because we're not dayanim. So it's not always a pashat ezach to go to Bezdin. It's not always. I mean, we should do. I'm not saying we shouldn't go to Bezdin and go to court. That's not what I mean. We should always go to Bezdin first, wherever reasonable and possible. But just don't have an expectation that everything is what you think is svaradik. That's not true. That's not true. So all of that was the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say that the reason why we need to have the shiur present is not because he's going to take the stand, but it's because we have a hekesh from Bailim to Shvar. The Rabbi Yaakov, why does Rabbi Yaakov say differently? Rabbi Yaakov, he says, Bishlam of Bailim, b'nei tainaninu. I understand why we need the Bailim there, the defendant. The man gets to be a ben taina. He gets to open his mouth and say, sir, I think you misunderstood what happened. My animal didn't run and gore. That person took out a red sheet and was antagonizing my animal. That totally changes things. They're allowed to take the stand and talk. Also interesting, you don't see this a lot in halacha, that the defendant takes the stand. Have you ever seen this? It's always based on Edim. Nobody cares what the guy says. We only look at Edim. His opinion doesn't matter. But over here, the Gemara seems to say that we do have this opportunity for the Bailim to be a ben taina. Masha'ein Kain, says the Gemara, Elashor bar ta'anosahu. What are you expecting from the shiur? He's going to give a svara. Before I gored the guy, I saw a red mat. He's a cow. He's a cow. So Rabbi Yaakov he ignores the hekesh. He doesn't care about it. That brings us to the 2/3 of the way down, maybe a drop more. We had said in our Mishnah that Masr shomer chinav u'leshol v'chulei, all the arba shomrim. We had said over there that if a shoel or any of the shomrim take over your animal for a period of time, then whatever happens during that time, as it relates to goring, is the responsibility of that shomer. So let's get into the sugya. Tana Rabbanan, arba nichnasu tachas habaylim. There are 4 people that can replace the responsibilities of the bailim. Ve'eluhein shomer chinam v'hashoel nosei sachar v'hasocher. Someone who watches for free, someone who borrows, someone who's paid to watch, and someone who rents. During that time, hargo, if the animal that you're watching, you the shoel, if that animal gores, so tamin, if the animal was still in a docile state, then nehergen, the animal gets killed, upturin min hakofer, and if it kills a person, it would be pater from kofer. Muadin, if the animal was already a dangerous animal, so then nehergen umashalman es hakofer. Then not only is the animal killed, which is pashut, but of course the animal will pay kofer, because the din of kofer, which is a din that applies when an animal kills a person, that applies by a case of muad. And as well, I, the shoel, in addition to having to pay the muad payments to the victim, I also have to pay back, this is what we were discussing earlier, I also have to pay back you, the bailim, who owns the shiur. Because remember, I got your animal killed. Especially if it's muad. If it became muad under me, it's on me. So I owe you a cow. I owe you another Betsy, whatever the cost is. Chutz mishomer chinam, these words are going to become very important shortly. However, it's not true with a shomer chinam. With a shomer chinam, then I don't have to be machzir demei shor lebailav. The Gemara asks a couple of questions. Amre, the question that was posed was heichidami. What is the case that we're talking about? Idin natre, if the shomer was watching the animal carefully, afilu kulhu nami lifteru, then everyone should be pater. Why would anyone, tam, muad, whatever, if my shmira was a good shmira and the animal has hops and was able to jump over a fence that it should not be able to jump over, so then idin natre, if you did your good job, so then afilu kulhu nami lifteru. And idin lo natre, and if you did not do a good job of shmira, well, if that's true, then afilu shomer chinam nechayev. Even the shomer chinam who has the lowest level of burden because he's not even being paid, he's pater from geneva naveda, he's pater from ones. I mean, whatever, you got to watch the umbrella, but you don't have to buckle it down and whatever. Just put it in your front closet, do basic shmira. But if what you're saying is that the shomer chinam didn't even lock the gate to the bull, say he's an idiot, and of course he's going to be chayiv. Everyone should be chayiv in that case. So what's our Mishnah talking about? What's the Brisa talking about? If there was no shmira, so then everyone's chayiv, and if there was shmira, everyone should be pater. So the Gemara says, Amrei, 4 lines from the bottom on Mem Hey Amud Aleph. Amrei hacha b'mayaskinon denatre shmira pchusa, v'lo natre shmira me'ula. This is where you did your basic responsibilities of watching. However, v'lo natre shmira me'ula. You weren't just checking off a box. You were only checking off a box. You were not doing an exceptional job in watching. I'm just going to make up a parameter. Instead of locking the animal in a backyard and putting a leash on it, all you did was lock the animal in the backyard and you didn't put a leash on it. You did shmira pchusa, you did a little bit, the basic, like the cheapy version of shmir, but you didn't do anything special. Shomer chinam, in regards to a shomer chinam, and the reason why the Brisa said the language of chutz mishomer chinam in regards to have to pay back the initial owner, that's why we said shomer chinam is left out of that, because kal salo shmiraso. You who are being paid 0 have the lowest level of obligation of shmira. So here's how it works. And I'm making a little bit of stuff up here, but you'll get the point. The shomer chinam who's watching for free, he has to do shmira pchusa. Very, very basic. But if you're a shoel, your shmira has to be much better. And in between, there are gradations also for nosei sachar and for socher. But a shomer chinam, it's not the same shmira for everyone. They're different. If you're a shomer chinam, your shmira can be minimal, and you'd be pater if anything happened. You're fine. Basic is okay. But Hanach, says the Gemara, not the shomer chinam. The other 3, the nosei sachar and the socher and the shoel, those 3 Hanach lo kal sa shmirasan. They did not do a good job. That's why the Brisa distinguishes between a shomer chinam, where it says that it's pater from paying back the dmei shor lebaila. If I'm the shoel, I don't have to pay you back, even though I got your animal killed, if I'm a shomer chinam. But if I'm a nosei sachar or a socher or a shoel, I would. Amrei, the Gemara asks, Kiman, who is this like? The very bottom line of Mem Hey Amud Aleph, Iki Reb Meir. If you want to say that this approach is like Reb Meir, well, that does not make sense. Why not? Because on the top of Mem Hey Amud Beis, and we're going to end the Parak Emir Hashem today, there, the Amar Socher Kishomer Chinam Dami. According to the Shita of Reb Meir, the level of Shmira that we require of a Socher is the same as that of a shomer chinam. And if that's true, then the Brisa which taught us that the shomer chinam has the lowest level of responsibility and is therefore pater from repaying the bailim, then lisni chutz mishomer chinam v'hasocher. If you're saying like Rav Meir, then there are 2 things in that shomer chinam category. There's shomer chinam and there's also socher. So that Brisa that we learned on the bottom of Mem Hey Amud Aleph cannot be Rav Meir. And V'i, says the Gemara ki Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to say it's like the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, what does he say? The Amar Socher kenosei sachar dami. If you want to say that it's like Rabbi Yehuda who holds that Socher is like a nosei sachar, so then yes, nisni chutz mishomer chinam, that part of the Brisa is correct. But if you're saying that Socher and nosei sachar are the same, then it also should say v'chulan b'muadin peturin le'inyan kofer. Then even in the case of muad, everyone should have been pater from kofer, which would have been the din of Rabbi Yehuda. And we don't see that in our Brisa either. So this, we're going to see 2 answers. We're on Mem Hey Amud Beis, 4 lines down. Amar Rav Huna bar Chinana Hamani. Okay, you've made your point. It's difficult to understand our Mishnah. Who is that Shita like? Rebbe Lazar he. And we're going to learn about these 3 Shitas in the next Mishnah. Rebbe Lazar has a special din that if you have an animal that's a muad, there's only one course of action that is halachically acceptable. To Amar, Ein lo shmira ella sakin. The only way to watch a muad is to kill it. No trustworthiness of an animal that's been established as a muad. He is now a dangerous animal. It's the difference between a juvenile delinquent who's a little violent and a known serial killer. One kid maybe you can fix. The serial killer, l'chora not, right? You're not going to take these mamzerim who are killing people, right?
Who kills the animal?
What?
Who kills the animal?
Doesn't say. which that's not discussed. I don't know. I'm sure that I don't know is a better answer than it doesn't say. Our Gemara doesn't discuss it, but I would imagine that the Bailam have to kill him. And the animal, by the way, has no value, especially if there's a Gemara din. Okay. So this is the unique sheet of Rebbe Lazar, and the Gemara says that our brisa must be like Rebbe Lazar because our brisa doesn't fit according to Reb Meir, who holds that a shomer chinam is like a socher, and our brisa doesn't fit like Reb Yehuda, who says that a socher is like a nosei socher. And ule inyan socher, the Gemara says 6 lines down, savar lak Reb Yehuda. In regards to socher itself, our brisa is a bit of a blend. Primarily, we hold like Rebbe Lazar, but when it comes to a socher, savar lak Reb Yehuda da amar socher kinosei socher dami. So that's approach number 1 as to how we understand our brisa, that it's a blend between Rebbe Lazar and Rabbi Yehuda. Abai is not having it. Abai amar le'olam ki Reb Meir. Really, our brisa is like Reb Meir, which is a problem. Reb Meir sheet is on the top of the page, top line on Mem Hayamid Beis, where he says socher is kishomer chinam dami. But if in fact a socher is like a shomer chinam, then our brisa is missing words. When our brisa on the bottom of Mem Hayamid Aleph said chutz mishomer chinam, it should also say, if you're a Reb Meir guy, it should also say v'hasocher. But it doesn't say that. So therefore, Abaye explains, Uchidim machlif Rabba Baravua. Rabba Baravua actually understood the machlokas of Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in opposite form. He understood the sheets differently. Vitani, he said as follows: Socher ketzad meshal, Rav Meir omer kishomer sachar, Rabbi Yehuda omer kishomer china. According to this version, Rav Meir in this brisa doesn't say what he says on the top line of the page. On the top line, he says socher is kishomer china. Here on the 8th line, Rav Meir omer kishomer sachar, that a socher is like a shomer sachar. So therefore, it's possible that our Mishnah is that way. Very good. So we had 2 answers to our Mishnah, and Lamaisa, however we look at it, we are able to figure out our brisa according to either Reb Meir or possibly, like the first approach that we took, as a blend between Rebbe Lazar and Rabbi Yehuda. And that brings us to the next din. 10 lines down on Mem Hayamid Beis. Let's continue. Rebbe Lazar, Masar Shoro l'Shomer Chinam. Let's say that you give me, I'm a Shomer Chinam, you give me Betsy, and you said, Phil, I'm going out of town. Can you be a cow watcher? No problem. Happy to watch your cow. So Hizik, if your animal while I'm watching it, so I'm the Shomer Chinam, if the animal damages while I'm watching it, Chayev. Huzak, if it gets damaged, Putter. Whole different layer. We've only been discussing goring. We haven't been discussing the animal that I'm watching being gored. So you might have assumed that I've taken the burden of responsibility to make sure your animal doesn't gore others, but I might not have taken responsibility to be the protector to prevent your animal from getting gored. So let's discuss. Amrei hechidami. They asked on this brisa, it's actually not a brisa, the statement of Rebbe Lazar, it's officially a memra. When we talk about Amoraim, the Amoraim's statements were referred to in the Rishonim as a memra. And the memra is basically like a distillation of a shiur that was given in yeshiva. So Rebbe Lazar gave a shiur. The conclusion of the shiur was this, that Masar Shor l'Shomer Chinam Hizik Chayev Huzak Pater. So let's analyze. Amrei hechidami, what's the case? If the Shomer Chinam accepted upon himself damages, even the damage of getting damage, then afilu huzak nami l'chayev. Of course, pashut. If I were a Shomer Chinam and you said, "Can you watch my dog?" My job is both to make sure that the dog doesn't attack others and doesn't get attacked. But if I, as the Shomer Chinam, do not accept upon myself the damages that might happen to the animal, afilu hizik nami li pater. The Gemara in its questioning phase seems to assume that both my watching of your animal as it relates to damaging others and getting damaged are both one and the same. And whatever level of shmira I take, those 2 things either come together or don't happen at all. So either, says the Gemara, I'm chayev on making sure your animal doesn't gore and doesn't get gored, or I am not chayev on that at all. But it seems to be that there's no middle of the road. So Amar Rava, the Gemara gives a little bit of an answer. We're getting close to the Mishnah here. La'olam shekibel alav shmiras nezakav. Really, the Shomer Chinam, I did accept a burden of responsibility to keep your animal from endangering others. Why is this case any different? Because kikon shehikir boshu nagchan. I saw your animal was a shtickle wild. Wasn't a muad yet, but I saw it was wild. V'stama demilsa. What is the standing assertion? What is the standing assumption when I am a Shomer Chinam? Delo azil ihu umazik achrini kabilale. That what I've accepted upon myself And this breaks the assumption of the question. The question assumed that my shmira of your animal from damaging others and for your animal getting damaged were different. And says Rava, were the same. And Rava says, no, they're very different. What's the stama de milsa? 1/3 of the way down, Mem Hamid Beis. Delo azil ihu umazik achrini kabilale. What I, as a shomer chinam, accepted upon myself is to ensure that your animal doesn't gore others. But to asi achrini umaski le'lididei, but that which the Gemara says is another animal coming to damage your animal, which I'm currently watching, lo asik adaite. That's the Gemara's conclusion. Let's summarize this Nakuda because it has a lot of practical applications. Let's say that, let's just talk out the conclusion. What the Gemara says in the name of Rava is that if I become a shomer chinam, I am obligated to ensure that that which has been entrusted to me doesn't damage other things. But it is seemingly not my responsibility as a shomer chinam for that which damages your thing that I'm watching. L'dugma, if I have your car, right, I have to make sure that it doesn't damage other things. The car has to be parked normally. I have to close all the doors, right? I may not even be able to use your car as a shomer chinam. It may be a bad example. That's why animals are very good. The dog is an even better example. Right, let's go with the dog. A lot of people have dogs. So if you have a dog and you ask me to be your dog watcher, so Rava says I'm only responsible for what your dog does as it relates to damaging others. But I'm not responsible as a shomer chinam, as the lowest level of shmira, for damage that happens to your dog that I'm watching. That's a very fine line in the sand, but it also lowers my level of culpability and responsibility because I'm not being paid. That's what the Gemara says. New Mishnah. The Mishnah says halfway down on Mem Hamid Beis, Kashu baila b'mosera, if an animal was tied down with its reins, v'no'al b'fanav karoi, and the animal was locked up in an appropriate gait, v'yatza v'hizik, and still, miraculously, it wriggled out of its rein and had hops and jumped over the wall. Echad tam ve'echad muad chayev divrei Rav Meir. Rav Meir is a strict hardliner, and he says whether or not your animal is docile or dangerous, the halacha is that you are going to be chayev. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, he says, Tam chayev, this is odd, and we're going to analyze all these shitas tonight, that the animal that's docile, that's when you'd be chayev if it escapes, but umuad pater, the more dangerous is backwards, but the more dangerous animal that is an escape artist, you'd be pater if it causes damage to Nemar, v'lo yishmerenu be'alav, v'shamor huzeh. This is pater. The pasuk of v'lo yishmerenu be'alav is said by a muad, but you did your job. The only time a muad is going to be held accountable is when you don't do shmira. But if you do your shmira, you'll be pater. Rebbe Lazar Omer, ein lo shmira ela sakin. And this was the shita we saw earlier on the page, that according to Rebbe Lazar, the only shmira for a muad is death row. You know, again, just carrying over to our American system, we make an assumption that the people on death row don't belong in society anymore, and by the power invested in whatever state they decided they say about this muad, he has no chance of healing, of repair. Say we're going to kill him. Let's analyze these three shitas, and then we'll call it a day. The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down at the open of the Gemara, my taima de Rav Meir. What was the reason for the party line shita of Rav Meir that he held that bein tam, bein muad, the bailam are chayev? Because, and this is a multi-layered answer. Here's layer number one. Stam shvarim la b'chezkas shimur kaimi. We assume that a cow is not typically in a state of being watched. V'amar achmona tam nechayev. The reason why we say that a tam is held accountable is dini boy le shmir bechusa, because since stam shvarim are la b'chezkas shimur kaimi, and you didn't watch your tam, so you're chayev because at the very least we need a shmir bechusa. And Hadar Amar Rachman v'lo yishmerenu gabe muad, and this we explained already in the Mishnah, that when it says v'lo yishmerenu, it says in regards to muad, dini boile shmir me'ula, and by the muad, it says that he needs a shmir me'ula. So as of now, we see that the tam requires shmir b'chusa, the muad requires shmir me'ula. However, here's the final part of Rav Meir: v'yalef negicha letam, negicha lemuad. What we do is it looks like a kal v'chomer. We learn from the word negicha, which is written by tam, to the word of negicha, which is written by muad. And therefore, says Rav Meir, echad tam ve'echad muad chayev, that no matter what happens, even if you did an awesome shmira, it doesn't matter. You're always held accountable when your animal causes damage. Last of the short lines, Rabbi Yehuda Savar, he held a little bit differently. Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah had a very unique shita, and he said that a tam is going to be chayev, the docile animal will be chayev, while the dangerous animal will be pater. How did he get to that shita? And this is a complex answer also, multi-layered and complicated. Follow along. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, stam shvarim b'chezkas shimor kaimi. We do assume that the average shore is being watched. Amar Rachmana tam nishalem tiboyle shmir meula. This is a chiddush too, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Torah says that a tam has to pay. Why? Because unlike all the other shitas that we've seen before, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that a tam requires a shmira meula. A tam requires even that higher level of shmira. And Hadar Amar Rachmana, then the Torah says, V'lo yishmerenu gabe muad, and that teaches us that the pasuk which is written by Muad, where it says V'lo yishmerenu, denavid le shmir meula, there too we need to have shmir meula. But if that's true, then we've learned the same din twice. We've learned that a tam needs shmir meula, and we learned that a muad needs shmir meula. So the Gemara then jumps in, have a ribui achar ribui, and here's where we get into some of the exegetical rules of how to extract things from the Torah. And here the Gemara says, "Ve'ein ribui achar ribui ela lemayit." When you have two dinim in a row in the Torah that teach us the same exact idea, then that means there's actually a miut that's supposed to be here. The ribui number one was that we learned that by a tam you need shmir me'ula, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And number two was that we learned that not only by a tam, but even by a muad, you need shmir me'ula. So that's odd. Why would I have both of those things being taught? That's a ribui achar ribui. And ein ribui achar ribui elo lemayit. Therefore, miyet hakasuv l'shmir me'ula. We therefore said that when it comes to the world of a muad, it must be that is where the Torah is telling us that we do not need shmir me'ula is by a muad, because the pasuk says v'lo yishmerenu be'alav, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that if a tam escapes, you're going to be chayiv, and if a muad escapes, you're going to be pater. And says the Gemara, perhaps you would argue that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, we need to borrow the kal v'chomer and use it here too, the same one that Reb Meir used a moment ago, of negicha latam, negicha lamuad. No, says the Gemara, Hamid Rachman of Lo Yishmerenu Lezeh V'lo Acher. V'lo Yishmerenu, he argues that the Kal V'chomer of Reb Meir is unacceptable because we have something that ruins it, which is V'lo Yishmerenu applies only Lezeh, only to a muad. The reason we only apply it to a muad is because the pasuk of V'lo Yishmerenu was written by a muad, V'lo La'acher, but not in regards to a tam. So therefore, the Gemara says that is how we know that a tam is going to be chayiv and a muad is going to be pater. Says the Gemara, hold on 1 second. I need the pasuk of V'lo yishmerenu liba'alav in regards to the lav of not watching the animal carefully, in addition to teaching me that the muad is going to be pater. So says the Gemara, Im Kain, if that were to have been the case, that we couldn't learn that, that would only have been true if Nichtov Rachman V'lo Yishmor, my V'lo Yishmerenu. Why does the Torah go out of its way to speak in plural? Says the Gemara, Lo Zeh V'lo Acher, that teaches us that it is only about a muad and not about a tam. And another brisa, we're 5-6 lines into the wide lines on Memhei Amud Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom. Tanya, the brisa writes, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Echad tam ve'echad muad sheshamru shmir pchusa pater. Whether or not the animal is a tam or a muad, the halacha is that even if you only do a shmir pchusa, you're pater. That is not what any of the shitas of our Mishnah said. This brisa is an added brisa. It doesn't align with our Mishnah. Let's analyze. My taima. What is the reason why Rabbi Elazar says that bein tam bein muad you'd be pater with a shmir pchusa? Because sabar lak Rabbi Yehuda da amar muad b'shmir pchusa sagile. He agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that a shmir pchusa, that a minimal amount of watching is correct, and as well v'yalif negicha latam v'negicha lamuad. And because he learns that a tam is pater with a shmir pchusa, and he applies the kal v'chomer of negicha latam, negicha lamuad, we therefore see that bein latam, bein lamuad, you're going to be pater. Amar of Ada bar Ava, lo pater Rabbi Yehuda ela tzad ha'adah shebo. The only thing when we said, ledugma, when we said according to Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, and if you look back in our Mishnah, what did we say? That tam is chayiv and muad is pater. So Rav Ada bar Ava is qualifying what Rabbi Yehuda meant when he said that the muad is pater. And what he says is as follows. Lo pater Rabbi Yehuda ela tzad ha'adah shebo. When we say that the muad is pater, it does not mean that he pays 0. if that animal is muad and you are watching it and it escapes, you're pater for part of it, only the muad aspects because of the pasuk of V'lo yishmerenu. But aval tzad tamus b'mekoma omedes. But the tam aspects, it's a minimal payment. You'd have to pay the half. Chatzi nezek. No matter what, you have to pay chatzi nezek. Because of Xeris HaKasiv, you wouldn't have to pay the second half of the muad, but you still have to pay the tzad tamus because tzad tamus b'mekoma omedes. Omar Rav teaches a din, and we have to figure out how he fits into what we just learned. What does Rav teach us? Let's say you have a cow who's a righty. Muad lekeren yamin. The cow always gores with its right horn. So it's established as a muad with its right horn, but eino muad lekeren small. It never gores or rarely gores with its left horn. So therefore, the animal is considered to be a muad with the right horn and a tam with the left horn. Amre, the Gemara says, aliba deman. Who does Rav's shita go like? But the Rab Meir, that doesn't work. Even the left one should be chayiv, because according to Rab Meir, even the tam, and in this case, the left horn is deemed a tam. In that case, we still need shmira ma'ula, and it's lacking. And aliba de Reb Yehuda, my area Karen small. Afilu bimin nami ispeit tzad tamos ispeit tzad muadus. No matter what, you'd still be chayiv something. You wouldn't be completely putter, because even according to Reb Yehuda, you're still obligated to pay a minimum of chatzi nezek even in a tzad muad. So Amre, the Gemara responds that who is Rav's case like? The case where the right horn is muad and the left horn is not. The Gemara says 2 lines from the bottom, Amre la'olam ke Reb Yehuda. Really, Rav's shita aligns with Reb Yehuda, but below svirle de Rav Ada bar Ava, he disagrees with how Rav Ada bar Ava understood Reb Yehuda's putter. The hachi kamar ki haigavna hu de mishkachas be tzad tamos umuadus. Really, you're obligated in both. Aval muad legamre, but if an animal is completely muad, top of mem vav amud aleph, lo mishkachas beitzad tamus klal. Rav Ada bar Ava wanted to say that when an animal is fully muad, that you're still chayiv and chati nezek for the tzad tamus shabo. But the Gemara is saying that Rav disagrees with Rav Ada bar Ava's understanding of Rav Yehuda, and therefore, when our Mishnah says in the name of Rav Yehuda that you're pater, you're completely pater. And that brings us to the 2 dots. And now we're going to analyze the unique shita of Rebbe Lazar, who said, Rebbe Lazar Omer, Ein lo shmira ela sakin. We had said that if an animal is in fact a muad, the din is that he has to be killed. There is no healing for this animal. He can't be fixed. Omar Rabba, my time of the Rebbe Lazar. Why does Rabba say that the animal needs to be killed? So he does something that's very complicated, and he looks at a word in the Torah and changes its tense. We know that there's avar, hoveh, and atid. Says the Gemara, de omar kra v'lo yishmerenu, shuv ein lo shmira lazeh. It's impossible to watch this animal in the future. He's not saying that it was impossible in the past. He's saying now that it's a muad, v'lo yishmerenu, I'm not able to be shomer this animal. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. We have a lot of words in the Torah that are like that. And the Gemara gives a great example. Mem vav amud aleph, 5 lines down. Amar le Abaye, ela me'ata. If you're looking at the word yishmerenu and telling me it's atid and telling me it's a futuristic word, well, if that's true, ela me'ata dichsi v'lo yechasenu, which is the same format as yishmerenu, nami shuv ein lo kisui lazeh. If you have a boar, you're saying you can't cover a boar? A boar is not as dangerous as a shor hamuad. Cover the boar. Just yichasenu, just cover it. You can't say yishmerenu is future for a boar, for an animal, but yichasenu is not future for a boar. That makes no sense. So then the Gemara says, if you want to even say that were to be true, that yichasenu, if there's a boar, it means that we can never cover it again. It's not true. Because if in fact you do cover it properly, and still we see that the covering does work. So therefore, you can't take the word yishmerenu and make it a future word. That can't be the reason by Rebbe Lazar that he says that ein lo shmira ela sakin, which is that yishmerenu is a future word. Because if you do that, you have to change every other word that's formatted like yishmerenu. Yechasenu, yekablenu, whatever other words there are in Chumash, doesn't matter. So that answer does not work. Last but not least for the day, Ela Amar Abaye, Hainu Taimad Rebbe Lazar. Why does Rebbe Lazar say, Ein lo shmira, ela sakin, that when we have an animal that's a muad, that it has to be killed, kidetanya? because the Brisa writes, Reb Nasan Omer minayin shelo yigadol adam kelav rabesoch beso. How do we know that a person should not raise an evil dog in his house? Ve'al yamid sulam ra'ua besoch beso. And he shouldn't have a ladder that is unstable at his house. Shene'emar v'lo sasim damim b'veisecha. The reason why Rebbe Lazar says that you need a sakin, you need to kill this animal, is because it's pashut dangerous. It's no massive halachic chidushim. It's just dangerous, and you have to take care of it. Hadran Allah Shor Shanagach Arba V'Chamisha Yiratzim. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night.